All right, today we have another episode from the archives with one of my incredible guests. Enjoy. All right, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to help trauma therapists be their incredible selves, to be human, to be real, not just a clinician. I'm a big believer in who we are is more important than what we know. And this requires cultivating authenticity, genuineness, and vulnerability, and that requires intention. You can learn more about my courses and workshops by going to thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. Let's get started. All right, guys, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson, and very excited today to introduce my guest, Lisa Mitchell. Lisa, welcome. You ready to do this?
I am. Thank you so much for having me, Guy.
All right. So Lisa is the author of Creativity as Co-Therapist, The Practitioner's Guide to the Art of Psychotherapy. An art therapist, Lisa has specialized in helping teens and adults use art and creative expression to overcome anxiety, depression, and trauma for over 20 years. Lisa's online and in-person workshops are popular for the in-depth, hands-on creative experiences she facilitates to help therapists find unique ways of approaching the therapeutic process as a creative one. Lisa is also the organizer and host of Create Fest, an annual online creativity festival that provides inspiration and education for therapists to, quote, get out of the box and into their right mind. I love that. Lisa partners with her own creativity through writing, knitting, and painting. Her blog features reflections on all creative endeavors, and that's at innercanvas.com. We'll have that linked up. So awesome. So welcome. Share with our listeners where you're from, where you're calling from, and let's get going.
Yeah, I'm from Sacramento, California. And
okay.
Yeah, we are. I'd like to declare that the drought is over in California, which is a great triumph. Yeah. It's a wonderful thing to have moisture in the air and on the ground.
Nice. Where are you from originally?
I was born in California, but I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So okay. I'm a sort of a multi-coast person.
That's very similar to me. So I'm in Oakland right now.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, and originally from the East Coast. So.
No kidding.
Yeah. So a lot of us kind of move out here.
Transplants.
Transplant. Yep. So let's start here, Lisa. As you know, we start with a quote, a sentence, something to kind of give our listeners a little glimpse into what's going on with you and to set the stage. What do you have?
So yeah, I have a bit of an intro to the quote as well as the actual quote. Saki Santorelli, who is the author of Heal Thyself, is just such an inspirational writer to me and person. And in his book, he says this. He says, if we are not careful, our growing expertise can easily become a prison. To be a professional and to not know seems an oxymoron. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Nice.
Okay, and so that's the intro. Then the actual quote for me is,
okay.
Yeah. So then he says, and this is what I've carried around in my back pocket a lot. He says, when we stay closely and non-judgmentally with someone exploring pain, we find beauty in the midst of the ruins.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. So break that down for us. Why that quote? When did that blossom for you in a sense?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it really captures the essence of the creative process for me. That the idea of sort of taking that which is, in your memory, in your experience, at your ready in terms of art materials, and putting it all together in a way that is really sort of hands-on and visceral, that you can't help but find gems. You can't help but find beauty. And I think that, it teaches this idea that we have to tolerate the ruins. We have to be in the ruins. We have to accept that they're there, the struggles of life, the sort of imperfections of art making, of the creative process are there. But when we stay with it, in a non-judgmental, really brave, sort of open way, then the beauty comes. And I think for me,
Wait! I have to recognize that.
Go ahead. Yeah.
What is that in the background? Roosters or?
Oh no! Can you hear it?
Yeah.
I have my headphones on. So, well, yes. My office is actually in a little suburb of Sacramento, and we have this strange history of having been a farm.
Oh wow!
Many, many years ago, and the leftover is wild roosters that just roam around.
Okay, that's perfect. I mean, I just wanted to recognize that in the background.
Right. Talk about beauty in the midst of the
There you
ruins,
go,
right? Yeah.
Okay. So that's out of there. So awesome. So I think as we kind of get into how you got into this, I think why this quote will unfold. So let's get in there. Tell our listeners how you got into this field, and tell the story for us, Lisa.
Yeah. So, I mean, my career has sort of just unfolded incredibly, but the start of it was in a sculpture studio that was a huge Quonset hut warehouse, like many, many blocks long, cold as heck, but open 24 hours a day on the Sacramento State University campus. And at the time, I was making these gigantic life-size, well, they were life-size, but they felt gigantic to me, sculptures of pregnant women. And I thought I was the biggest hotshot artist there ever was. And, had sort of a shaved head with white bangs coming out. And I mean, I did the whole 80s bit, right? Mm-hmm. And in the process, I figured out that what I was making was so personal and so important to me in terms of my own history and my own life journey, that the critiques that the professors and the other classmates were giving me were really hurtful. They were hard to take. They weren't on target because I wasn't trying to make something that would stand in a gallery. I was trying to express something that was really deeply personal and transform it into something beautiful. And what I found was when I dialed in, the atmosphere is what I was really thriving on. Everybody being in sync with one another, creating their own thing, but working in that same creative process, struggling in the same way to find ideas, to let them form, holding each other in that process in the sense that, if one of us was on a roll, we could all feel it and we would stay, into the night. And it was just fabulous. The upshot of it is that I learned through that process that it wasn't just the art product that was so healing and transformative. It was the process, that to be steeped in that energy, that endeavor, that had a commonality between people, for me was something that I wanted to do for a long, long time and recreate over and over again in my own studio. And so that's how I found art therapy. It was sort of by accident. There was a program on the campus. I went to the one professor who was a very small department, who was the head of the department. She said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to have a community where people can explore their own creative process and feel what it feels like to be in it and the possibility that comes with it. And she just sort of waved her hand at me and said, oh, you want to be an art therapist? And that day I signed up. So that was, 30 years ago. And the journey for me has been a deepening into what that process means in terms of healing, the potential that it has for myself as well as for my clients, and then passing it on to therapists in their own work with clients as well as in their own art. So that's how it all started.
So the idea that you were kind of in love with not only the act of making art or the art product in a sense, but the whole process and what that means. And this whole idea of art and therapists is very interesting to me. I have a background in art as well, but I also know that a lot of therapists are like, yeah, that's something over there. You know, that's what they do. And so I know this is kind of a bigger question, and I'm assuming Create Fest even addresses this too. But what do you say to therapists about if they're intrigued with art and they don't know how to kind of implement it or integrate it into the work they do? Maybe they even think they can't because they're not artistic. You probably have answers for all these questions.
Well, I mean, I think what's interesting, this is actually a huge passion of mine at this point because it's fascinating to me. So I've come to consider therapy as an art form. In my talking with and working with therapists, I've really started to overlay the creative process to the therapeutic process. And when you do that, the parallels, it's not just a parallel, it's that the therapy becomes to a therapist what a painting is to an artist. So when therapists can start to see their work already as an art form, that they utilize the same not knowing, the same need for seeing things new ways, the same way of thinking, pulling together disparate ideas or ideas from the past and ideas from the present and helping their clients see them. All kinds of approaches that artists use. Therapists get really excited and they say, oh my gosh, I guess I am a creative person. And then it is not at all a far, step over to say, and guess what? You can paint, you can write, you can draw, you can collage, you can manifest other creative things that only further nurture your ability to be a creative therapist. And I'll tell you what, when therapists see their work that way, it's like a falling in love all over again. It's like, oh my gosh, I have this really special way of being in the world that I didn't see before. And then they have more confidence to share it with their clients as well.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea because it really invites us to explore who we are really as humans and as individuals and bring that to the work we do. And oftentimes I think a lot of us initially get into this field. I'll speak for myself, really not with that idea. I mean, this whole idea of unknowing kind of can be scary. It's, what do you mean? I'm going to school to know.
Right.
Now you're asking me to not know. How do you respond to that?
Well, the first thing is that the more you live into the creative process, the more you understand that anxiety is a necessary part of it. And that if you're going to have, you're going to have anxiety no matter what. You can have anxiety if you don't dive in with a client, if you don't, if you have a plan, know exactly how it's going to go, but then, maybe you hit a dead end with a client in that session and there's the anxiety again, or you're going to have anxiety going in not knowing what's going to happen. And so what I say is it's part of the creative process and you just might as well face it, that when we are best, when we're most creative, it's when we are walking side by side with that anxiety rather than being paralyzed by it. And I also say that it's a muscle. It's something that when you're conscious and aware that it's happening and you practice going through it, diving into it, as opposed to shying away from it, it's like an exposure technique. It becomes almost excitement, rather than something to shy away from. I was talking with somebody, there's daring greatly, there's fearless creating, there's all these beautiful juxtapositions of these terms in relationship to the creative process that feel like, again, oxymorons, but they're not. And I was was diving into this big Create Fest process where, I'm interviewing all these really well-known, wonderful, amazing contributors to our field, and feeling like I have this big, huge project ahead of me and really uncertain, am I going to be able to pull it off? And it was just a couple weeks ago where I was just flooded with this sort of dread and this anxiety and sort of like, should I do it again? It's so big. Why am I doing this anyway? Maybe it could be this big failure. And what about these guest speakers? Maybe they're not going to be this good, or someone will say no, or, all this doubt and anxiety just facing me. And the thing is that when you're in it that big, you can't tell the difference of whether it's sort of this signal like, oh, just give it up, forget about it, it's not worth it, or this is just anxiety that's part of the creative process.
Right.
Just accept it. And so, I was noticing it myself living into what I teach, and decided that, okay, no matter what, I'm going to have this anxiety, and I just need to go forward and see where it takes me, as opposed to stop in my tracks and forget it, because that's not going to serve me either.
So you got into, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you came into the role of therapist knowing you wanted to be an art therapist.
Yes.
Correct.
Absolutely.
So how has that, or your understanding, shifted or unfolded in a sense from when you first started to even now?
Well, our brain research, interpersonal neurobiology information has really informed my work since I first began as an art therapist. And so now I feel better equipped to explain why art therapy works from a brain research standpoint. And in particular, it helps me understand and even explain to clients and then therapists that I teach what that sort of dysregulation process looks like and feels like for a client, and how we can help them through that, so that they're not re-traumatized, they're not overstimulated and over-dysregulated. So when I went into art therapy, it was sort of, it feels good, and it's sort of magic, and it transforms. And now the field has grown so much, and our information and research has informed it so much that we can say, no, it feels like magic, but here's what's happening in the brain. It's the real deal. Yeah.
Share with our listeners, Lisa, an early clinical error. What you learned from that.
Oh boy. Yeah. Well, that's a good, because I have a story that talks about that dysregulation piece. And a really dear client, one who helped me actually write a chapter or a little vignette in my book, who is doing really well today, but was a very significant early mistake of mine. So he and I were working quite intensely for about 3 months. He had some significant big T trauma as well as attachment stuff as a result of the trauma. And I won't bore you with all of the sort of historical details, but the upshot of it is we were working on trying to form a therapeutic relationship that would help him then start to process some of what happened and be able to hold on to himself in the process. Okay. So a cohesive narrative per se, or, an attachment relationship that would help him regulate and integrate some of the trauma. Well, I moved way too fast with him. I thought I was fairly new to my private practice. And I thought that he and I had established a really safe, solid connection, attachment that could help, what I called ground him at the time. Now we would call it help him regulate. And had sort of embarked on this endeavor where he and I were working on the same large piece of paper together, painting. And we were doing a conversation in color where he would take a turn, I would take a turn. We'd go back and forth, adding to the page as a way of affirming, establishing communication that was, safe, secure, gentle, affirming, that kind of thing. Now, the part of that is that I had established we weren't to use words, that we were to converse in color and line on the page. And he was game for it. We were going along doing, just fine. And pretty soon, fairly quickly, actually, the painting became kind of a brown, mucky, what I call poopy mess. Mm-hmm. And before I knew it, he had his hands in the paint on the page, sort of scribbling around. And he got, overstimulated, dysregulated in a really significant way, got up out of his chair, left my office, got in his car, and drove home.
Wow.
Which is not a safe situation at all. With that kind of dysregulation, his executive functioning wasn't online. It wasn't, equipped to deal with the traffic signals and that kind of thing. And it was a big mistake of mine to let it get to that point. He was fine. He texted me and let me know he was okay. We reconnected, did a lot of repair works afterwards. But that was a mistake on my part because I let it get to a point of re-traumatizing him, really putting his brain in that soupy, chaotic, over-flooded, overwhelmed state that was not at all transformative and healing. It was the opposite.
Well, first, thank you so much for sharing that. And it's a really instructive story. Looking back on it now, excuse me, do you think you would have stopped sooner or not done that particular exercise?
Well, I think it is instructive in the sense that so looking back on it, I'm much more feedback oriented with my clients now. I would have asked him first of all, at the start and even before I proposed the art invitation for him, I would have wanted more feedback information about how he was experiencing our relationship. Mm-hmm. I think as a new therapist, and this is true with other, new therapists that I talk to, is we're shy of saying, how does this feel? Mm-hmm. And how am I doing? Or how are we doing? What's this like for you? Rather than just assuming that since it felt solid and connected to me, that was the same for him. So then I wouldn't have relied so very much on the connection that I thought we had. And secondarily, I think, that idea of checking with your client in every session, not assuming that, again, if you think you probably don't because you haven't checked. Mm-hmm. How is this for you? Or how's this feeling? Or what's going on for you? And yes, I had established a no talk rule, but with him knowing that he had that big T trauma background and was easily overwhelmed and flooded, I would have been more cautious about that and used words to check, in terms of where he was with the process.
Right. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. That's, I just think so valuable. It's like a gold nugget, I think, for our listeners. Why do you do this work, Lisa? What's your why?
So, my wmy is because it's my art. And when I'm in my art, in my creative element, I think I'm the best the best human being I can be. And if I witness the creative process and the fact that, the reminder again and again and again, there's beauty in the ruins, finding the gems in the mess, all that kind of stuff, it helps me live a better life and then be a better therapist, be a better wife, mother, daughter, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's sort of this living into a philosophy and a belief and enriching it in a way that can both enrich my life and others, that keeps me going.
How about advice for people just getting into this field? And we can even kind of talk about your book and Create Fest as well, but for people for therapists who are like, you know what, I don't use art, quote unquote art, or anything creative, or I don't think I'm being creative in my therapy.
Yep.
What do you say to them? What advice?
So, what I'm hesitating because I don't want to sound like it's coming from a judgmental stance, but what I do say is there's a significant amount of research that says that if we aren't using experiential, body-based or creative-based work with our clients, we're really not making lasting change. And that therapists crave that. And if they're not doing something creative, something new or novel or experiential with their clients, they're missing out on a lot. And so what I tell, new therapists as well as old therapists is that it's a way to get renewed and to get inspired and to inspire your clients and feel a deeper sense of change and transformation that's not just going to be thought or insight, oriented. It's going to be more lasting. And I also tell therapists that, in that very same sense, you don't have to be a manual. You don't have to follow a protocol exactly. You have to learn the protocols and you have to learn the, science behind it. But once you do, the humanness that comes out when you make it your own and you work with a client and collaborate is so revitalizing that it's really worth it. And people get so excited. They just love it. It's like, oh my gosh, there was a treasure trove that they weren't even, knew it they had when they start to use it that way.
Yeah, I love those two bits. The importance of kind of experiential work, just kind of getting in there, shifting things up a bit if you're not doing that. And this idea of you don't have to be a manual.
No.
Do you find that a lot of therapists, it's hard to generalize, I understand that, but do we as a group cling to manuals? Are they kind of like our life rafts in a sense?
Well, I think what we as a group want to do is help. Mm-hmm. And that I think our field, because of managed care and the large agencies, we've been sold this idea that if you follow a particular protocol, then you're going to help. Mm-hmm. And here's the standard protocol to do that. And that's been a model. And I think that's been helpful to a certain extent, but our model hasn't really incorporated the research that we know about experience-based therapy. Now, some of them have, and then if you dive into those kinds of models, they really do say, jump off, use whatever you can, you collaborate with your client, so there's definitely that instruction as well. But this idea of having to know if you have a step-by-step and you're convinced it's going to work, it makes you feel more comfortable. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to be helpful. Well, Scott Miller's work tells us that that's all, a whole, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, a load of bull, uh-huh. that it really, comfort does not equal effectiveness. Uh-huh. And so back to that not knowing, that the more we can be in the new and the novel and the experiential and the collaboration and the humanness of that interaction in therapy, the more change, the more help we're going to provide for our clients.
Awesome. I love it. How about a go-to book?
Oh boy. Okay. I mentioned Saki Santorelli's Heal Thyself, Irv Yalom, Creatures of the Day. Anytime I feel like I need a pick me up, I read Yalom. And then the other, I just want to stick one in there, is an art therapy book, Kathy Highland Moon, Studio Art Therapy. She tells stories about her clients and her work, and they're just really inspiring.
Awesome.
And of course, mine.
Well, let's talk about your book, Creativity as Co-Therapist, The Practitioner's Guide to the Art of Psychotherapy. Again, I'll have that linked up at the show notes page at thetraumatherapistpodcast.com. Why did you write this book?
So I wrote it because I wanted to show therapists that they were artists and that what they were doing already was an art form. And so the book breaks down the creative process into 5 stages. It also breaks therapy down and the therapy session down into 5 stages, and they match perfectly. And so it's a book full of stories about my practice with therapists as well as clients, the creative process, and then it has activities for therapists to do for themselves as well as with clients to explore that. And basically, what I say is it's an invitation for therapists to fall back in love with the work they do, because I think that's really what it takes to be a good therapist.
I think, and that's a great kind of reminder and invitation for those of us who are working with trauma. I mean, it can often be extremely draining and daunting, and oftentimes we can feel like we don't know what the hell we're doing. We're not making a difference. So awesome. And what about Create Fest? Let's talk about that too, because I love this idea.
Create Fest is so wonderful. So Courtney Armstrong and I created this online creativity festival where it's the exact conference that we would want to go to if we weren't going to travel. So 12 expert speakers over 2 days. And the first half hour is an interview by the expert. And then the second half hour, to my word in terms of philosophy of teaching, is an experiential activity that the speaker has offered for the viewers. And we interact via the Zoom chat and Facebook, and it's just this community that has thrived
is this for
around
therapists?
it. It's for mental health professionals. Okay. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. And yesterday I had the privilege of interviewing Rick Hansen about his positive neuroplasticity training. Courtney's going to be on there, and some other incredible hands-on experiential art therapists as well as artists. And so it's going to be it's in May 2017, and people can find out about it from my website.
Awesome.
We'll be sending out. Yeah.
And you'll have to, I'll definitely, can promote that as well when that comes around. But people can access info at www.createfesttx.com.
It's TX, CreateFestTX.
CreateFestTX.com. Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure. You are so inspiring to talk to, and I think you open up a lot of eyes. I think a lot of our listeners are like, whoa, this is something that I want to learn more about, that I can kind of rediscover in a sense. And it's exciting.
Great. Thanks. I'm glad that sounds inspiring.
So awesome, Lisa. Take care. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me, Guy.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.